This is the 5th video for week 1, and it's important to understand the different types of research that people will do and why they're going to do it. This is an important distinction, not just because, again, it tells you why you're doing research, but it tells you what you're going to be looking at. If you are looking at something that's kind of unexplored and new, so for example, right now, there hasn't been a lot of research done on youth who are transgender. So a lot of that research is just starting out, which means a lot of it is focus groups, asking people, tell me about your experience. How often have you thought about suicide? What are some of the issues you've experienced with your family? Sometimes when there's a good understanding about what happens, then there's more explanatory. So, for example, you can do a lot of explanatory research connecting things like exposure to violence in young children and trauma and mental health issues in later life. Why? Because there's already been a lot of exploration. We kind of already understand how trauma works, what children have been exposed to, and there is now a better understanding where you can kind of start pulling out the different variables, the different things that could impact mental health, and start to see how, again, trauma can directly cause different types of mental health issues in older adults. And then, of course, it's not enough just to understand A causes B, trauma causes mental health issues. You also have to then figure out, okay, so what do I do about it, and does it work? Again, that's what makes us social workers versus community volunteers. We do programs that work, that have been proven to work. We evaluate them. If they're not working, we change them, we improve them, we revise them, and we use these to tell people that have very limited amounts of money, the government, foundations, why they should give us money over others. We want to make sure that dollars are being spent where they're going to make an impact, and so we have to make our case, because if we don't have the money, we can't prove our results, then we're just spinning our wheels and doing things out of the goodness of our heart that don't make an impact in the end. You'll see a lot in the syllabus about the distinction between qualitative and quantitative. And so just remember, quantitative is always going to deal with numbers, so think quantity. Qualitative will deal with quality, and so it'll deal with more descriptions. These are going to be your focus groups, your interviews, your tell me about this. I want to know what this is like for you. I want to know what you go through. Whereas quantitative is going to be how many people experience this? What percentage feel this way? What is the percentage that if A happens, B will happen? And so we do both types of research in social work, and both of them have their benefits and their drawbacks, and we'll look at some of those throughout this course. Then there's a couple of important concepts you also want to make sure you're familiar with. The concept of validity. Basically, let's say that you did a phone call where you started surveying people by phone, and you saw everybody did a great job of responding. But what if you just happened to touch on a facility for older adults that don't have any family support systems? Do you really think that if you're asking questions about depression, you really capture depression, or maybe you just happen to capture loneliness? Do the people that you captured actually represent everybody else in the population, or is it only representing the particular group? Can you say your results hold up, for example, if you were interviewing 30-year-olds that live on 7th Street in Fort Worth, or in different parts of Dallas? So that's validity. Generalizability then says, okay, so now that I know what I know, can I use this to tell me what everybody else is doing? If I ask 10 people, do those 10 people represent everybody else? If I'm testing a theory about men and aggressive behavior, and I ask 20 men some questions, can I assume that those 20 men represent all men in Texas, in the U.S.? You have to be really specific about who is included, how you select them, and who they're representing overall. And again, can you assume that this group actually represents that group? And there's a lot of that goes into research for that. The most difficult type of validity by far to prove is causal validity. You may have heard some of the controversy a while back about red meats like bacon or processed meats like hot dogs causing cancer. And this is just a perfect example of how the idea of causal validity is just so misunderstood, and why after this course you can sit down and explain to people. Again, when you're saying causal validity, you're just saying people that have cancer, when you go back and you kind of figure out what did they do that may have caused that cancer, for a lot of them, bacon, red meats, processed meats did have a role. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody that eats bacon is going to get cancer. That's a very different type of relationship. But people that already have cancer, you can see this was one of the variables that pretty much was certain to cause it. So throughout this course, as we dig into these concepts, you'll hopefully walk away with a better understanding so you can know the difference between predicting something and just showing that A causes B. Doesn't mean A will always cause B. It just means that it is one of the causes. So think about those. So in this course, you're going to be asked to do a research proposal where you're going to have to think of a research question. You want to start thinking about that now because there's a very specific way to frame those questions. And generally, it's going to be something like, is A associated with B in population C? So this might be, is trauma associated with abuse and children who've been abused? Is suicidal behavior associated with coming out as transgender among youth in North Texas? Does red meat cause cancer among meat-eating people in the United States? So think about those different kind of ways of phrasing a question as you're thinking of what you want to study. So again, just to kind of wrap up then, the emphasis here is you have to critique the research quality. It's not just enough to know what research is, the general concepts of how it happens, but you have to challenge everybody, challenge researchers, challenge the government, challenge authority. That doesn't mean don't trust them. That means challenge them with the knowledge of what they're doing. If you don't understand how they're doing it, you can't properly challenge it. Don't just become that person that says, I don't trust the government and I don't trust researchers without actually knowing what they're doing, okay? So, because we're in social work, it's so important to understand then what happens when you don't understand that research. So these are some of the different interventions that we know, not just that they didn't work, but some of them actually harmed people. One of the ones that I gave you a link about is reparative therapy, something that research has consistently shown can be harmful when tried to use to quote-unquote remove the gay from people who identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual. Click on this link, check out that video, just so you can see how terrible it is when research is not relied upon, not taken into consideration in what we do with our clients. You want to make sure that in everything, you're doing more good than harm as a social worker.